let's get a handle on the issue. Remember, that's the first order of business, at least as far as I'm concerned, is to independently of the literature understand what's at stake. We'll do that first. Then I'm just going to do a quick aside. The second bullet item here is not necessarily in the book, but I'm going to tell you what the chapter presupposes. The chapter hits the ground running, having made already a lot of decisions. I'm going to flag those assumptions precisely because if you ever find yourself thinking, damn, I feel cornered into conclusions I don't find acceptable, you can backtrack quite a bit and actually question those starting assumptions. And there are assumptions I actually, in my professional work, don't agree with. And so I will flag those, and then we'll dive into the chapter per se. So here, when I say unspoken, I think there's one that ends up being discussed in the chapter, but 5 assumptions that are basically taken for granted in the chapter. And in the chapter itself, it's an interesting chapter. I will do parts of it, and then we'll try to leave enough time for the second half topic. But first, let's get a handle on the issue. Does that sound like a plan? Is everyone ready for that? If you're good to go, tell me good to go. Let me stretch. You rub my eyes a little bit. Coffee's setting in. All right, let's crack that whip. Let's do this. Does everyone remember this? Type in yes if you remember this. All right, so tell me in your own words, what the hell was the point when we looked at this? Like, what were we trying? What was the point? We were trying to problematize something. What were we trying to do? What was the point? In your own words, and it doesn't matter if it's badly stated, just say what you must. Try to make a sentence. Possible worlds what? Test your intuitions. That's probably a pretty nice formulation. The point was to show how difficult it is to prove the truth value of that sentence. So we all agreed that this was a true sentence. Remember, we have to start, think of when we did ontology and the Squinian method. We got to start with true sentences. I think we can all agree that this is a true sentence. But then we were asking ourselves, how the hell do you prove that this is true? And as Pearl pointed out, it's hard to prove the truth value of that sentence. Why is it hard? So let's keep exploring that thought. Why was it so hard to prove the truth value of the sentence? We all agree it's true. I mean, that was a really quick one. Why was it so hard for us to prove that it's true? What was tricky? And again, you can say it in your own words. Try to make a full sentence, because otherwise, just a couple words, keywords, I can't reconstruct what that means. You'll understand, but I won't. Now, take your time. Yeah, Brandon says, well, that's a nice formulation, because we're talking about things that haven't happened yet. Not only that, but would you agree, Brandon, we're talking about things that may not happen, right? There's no, yeah. Who says it'll break? Maybe, it's the end of time and it still hasn't broken. Pearl says a sentence deals with something that hasn't happened or might not happen, unlike sentences about we've seen. Yes, exactly. And I mean, once it breaks, it's a different thing, right? Then we say the vase has broken, but then we're switching the goalposts here. We're not saying, like, let's say it breaks. Let me give myself a red thing here. Let's say it breaks, and then we say the vase has broken. Right? It's now a different species of fact. And of course, if now that's true as well, imagine if it's broken, right? Broken. I'm using cursive here, right? This vase has broken, and we agree that would be true. The truth maker for that would be really easy. It's like, well, here's a present instance that we can observe. The situation that I currently have on the screen is unproblematic. That doesn't bother us. The one that F's us up is this one. It's very different. You don't want to move those goalposts. This is the one that we're concerned with making sense of, right? And so Samuel says, establishing that the vase can break when it's actually broken relies on lifting done by modal theory, so entails commitments elsewhere. Exactly, something like we're pointing to something that's not there. And that's damn problematic, excuse me, right? If you're pointing to something that's not strictly speaking there, that's damn problematic. Let me just kind of get everyone to agree on this. Everyone to agree that if I say this fist can open, like we're dealing with the same set of problems here. Like essentially, this is a true sentence, and we're basically right back to where we started. Can everyone see that? Type in yes if you can see that. It's like, this is a true claim. Again, we can all agree on that. and then it hasn't opened yet, right? If it were to open, it'd be like the vase was broken already. We'd be moving the goalposts. Everything I just said, right, applies to this, right? The whole problem carries over, that it's a vase or it's a hand, right? Same problems apply, right? And Francisca says, so the problem is that we want to say a truth claim without having the proof, only the proof of possibility. Exactly right. You don't want to switch the target to actual. Once you have the proof, it'd be actual. We want to prove the possibility. That was the problem with the modality stuff. We want to prove the possibility, not prove the actual thing, right? And this time, as Andre starts to, we can start now see everything that's in common. So there's a lot in common. Clearly, everything that we said about the vase kind of applies there, but there are some differences. What's the difference with the hand? Andre says, hand has a choice to open. How can we rephrase? Because there are some differences now. We're looking at a hand, fist there. Yeah, it's gonna, presumably, of course, we're going to assume this is not like there's someone out there on the other side, right? Yeah, connected to an agent, absolutely. There may be a subject making decisions. Exactly. I mean, it doesn't change the physiological structure to open. Well, if it opens, I don't know what that means, Amber. So, like it's a hand, we know the biology, and I'm not quite. If you can clarify that for me, it's certainly different than a vase. That's for sure. It's a little more complex. Well, a lot more complex. Let's keep sort of putting. Can relate to, because most people have a hand. That's true. That's true. Probably not super important, but that's a true observation. Certainly want to keep true observations in the mix. We can all relate to this. The vase can only break once, whereas the hand can open multiple times. That's also true, Amber. Nice observation. Okay, so can we agree that if nothing enters the picture here, the vase won't break? Can we agree on that? Type in agree if you agree. Like it's in a museum that's well guarded. Nothing. It's a constant. Everything around it is constant. It's alone on its pedestal. It's not going to break of its own accord. It's not going to pow. It breaks. Why? Don't know. Right? And if it does break, it'll be because something caused it to break. Right? Like there will be cause and effect. Something from without will go and break it, and we'll be able to spot this cause. We'll be like, here was the thing. Like we can meaningfully ask that question: what caused it? Right? What caused this effect if it were to break? Right. However, here, let's say a person is sitting alone in the museum. Let's say this is a security guard. They're sitting alone in a museum. Can their hand open without adding anything further into the museum? Let's say it's an empty room. There's only one person. Can their fist open without adding another object in the room? Yes, but there's still a cause, and that's we all agree on the yes part. And we will agree that there's a cause, right? So what's the cause? So if nothing comes in, it's not like a rock, because you can imagine, I could pry this hand open. Another person could, like a police officer could pry open this hand or something forcibly. Let's say you're trying to hide something in there. A rock could hit it and open it. A severe gust of wind could open it. Let's say it's holding a rope, right? And the rope is really, really pulling in this direction, and that could open the hand. But even without any of those bells and whistles, the hand could open. And it is true that this fist can open. And then the question is, well, what caused it? Any ideas? No rope, no gust of wind, no police officer, no wrestler. Psychological and biological process that belong to a causal change, an impulse in the brain, the hand's owner. Yeah, I mean, there's a temptation, right? There's a temptation to say, well, look, maybe on the outside you don't see something. There's no things, right? There's no things on the outside because that person's alone in a room. But there are thing-like entities within. Like if you actually were to close up and look inside this hand, essentially what you would find is essentially like a string of dominoes falling, right? Those dominoes are different. Like they'd be like a domino toppling the other one, toppling the other one, toppling the other one. Unpack this as, let's say, a chain of electrical impulses, right? and then you'd work yourself. You'd say, well, there's a brain somewhere. So this thing owns a brain. The brain send down an electrical impulse, and kind of like dominoes, that electrical impulse travel down the what we call afferent impulse, right? Travel down the nervous system, and out comes this, and then the hand opens. This is not Wolverine. I'm going to put 4. These are not sausage fingers everywhere, everything at once. These are the hand, out the hand opens, right? And there's a tendency to want to sort of reduce this picture to the kind of picture we have here, because this is a picture we can handle. It's problematic. We saw it last week, and 2 weeks ago, and I told you, was it last week? No, that was for modality, but we talked about causality also. This is a picture that if you're dealing with billiard balls and vases, it's still effed up, but it's much less effed up, right? And we want to say, well, how about we reduce the very, very effed up situation, which is this one, to something far less effed up, which is still screwed up and complicated, because you just wrote an entry on this. Even billiard balls are darn difficult to explain, right? Because we don't ever actually see causality. That's also an unseeable thing. We see the billiard balls moving, one event succeeding another. There's an and there, but there's no caused, right? And say we want to kind of reduce this picture to a picture where we explain biology in what we want to say something like mechanistic terms, right? Where we kind of put that there. And the thing is also, let me just kind of take a poll. Is anyone a vase? Yes or no? You ever been a vase? Do you know what it's like to be a vase? I'm going to go and type in the chat bar. No, unfortunately, I can't. You have these weird things when you're a dancer or a visual artist, right? A sculptor. Try to be a vase, like you probably have to take a lot of cannabis for that, but you learn how to be a vase, It's actually really interesting to try to do those exercises, but frankly, no, I'm not. I don't know what it's like to be a vase. Neither you can understand my reference to the bat, but what about this? Anyone have a hand? Type in yes if you have a hand. I've got a hand. I'm going to say yes. I also possess a head and everything else. Do you ever open your hand? Do you ever close your hand and then open it? Type in yes if you have. I've got 2. I got 2 hands, and I can open it. I like to type without one. That's right. That's right. It's kind of self-confirming question, right? If you can type it. Although you could be typing with your fingers if you had typing with your toes. The sausage finger people. My partner was really averse to that when she saw that scene where someone's caressing someone else with their feet and whatever. It's like, what's with all these feet? Right? Talk to text. Yeah, you can totally do it. You've opened your hand before I can open my hand, right? And the thing is, are there little dominoes inside us, or are we kidding ourselves? And if there are dominoes, well, we want to say, well, one domino, like if you have a chain of dominoes, right? Here's one domino. Let me put the first one up right? Here's a domino, and then the other ones topple. We understand that all other things being equal, if one domino in the sequence topples over, then all of the other ones will. So if this is domino 1, right, and then you get to domino, let's say 10 at the end, to have the first domino fall, all things being equal, is thereby to have the 10th domino fall, because these causal relations are going to have these impacts and impact and impact and impact. However we want to understand those impacts, right? And we saw that last week. There's that happening. And the question is this an appropriate model for understanding this, or is this something different, right? And there's important differences. There's important similarities, but important differences. And the tricky part is, let's say the hand does open. Once the hand is open, we've changed, right? We've changed the goalpost, because if the hand is open, this sentence is no longer applicable, because the fist is not, we're not saying the fist can open, right? At that point, we'll be saying that the fist is open, and it will have moved the goalpost. And everything we said before, right, applies. You've changed the goalposts. Now we're talking about something else that's far less problematic. It's actual, exactly, Samuel. So now you're looking at the open hand. And of course, if you want to say the hand is open, right, and supposing you have this in front of you, is this claim true or false? Like currently it's closed, and I say the fist is open. We want to say it's true or false. Is this claim true or is it false? Clearly it's false. So the truth maker is really easy. We can assess the truth or falsity of this, right? And then if the situation changes, right, and the hand is open, and then we say the fist is open, is this true or false? And once again, we have a truth maker in front of us. We try to assess the truth of the proposition. What does it come out as? Once it's open, and we say the fist is open, then thereby the claim is, once it's actually open, the claim is true. Exactly. But notice, once again, all of that's besides the point, right? The question is, can we say that this fist can open? So there's questions of modality in the vicinity. There's questions of causality in there. And because we're not dealing with a vase, there's nothing like when you look for, right, the cause of what broke it, you can kind of find it in a straightforward manner. It was a ball that a kid threw. Fair enough, man. It's very easy to find the cause for that. Do we at least agree that on the surface, the cause of the hand opening is far trickier to locate, given that the room is empty short of that person? Can we at least agree on that? Like on the surface, at any rate, it's far less obvious what's the cause, quote unquote. Like we got to put this in scare quotes, right? Because we haven't paid for it. We don't need to pay for the ball hitting the vase, right? It's like it's the ball, it hit the vase, problem solved. This one's like talk of cause, man. And the question is going to be coming down to this: do we want to say that there was a cause, or that there was an agent that result in the effect? Do we want to say that it's the cause, or do we want? So let's say the effect is that the fist opens. What was the cause? Was it a cause in the sense of a billiard ball, some dominoes, or was it an agent? Like a moment ago when I gave you this example of the dominoes toppling, notice I helped myself to something really interesting. What did I help myself to? Like once I've got my domino chain falling, I skipped a step at the start. What did I skip? I said, well, all of the nerve impulses are reducible to dominoes. I've just smuggled in something. Yeah, exactly. What caused the first domino? Exactly. And that's like, whoa, slow down here. Because this is unproblematic. That once the dominoes fall, right? And that's the whole question, right? Is the decision, what is an agent's decision? Would an agent's decision not just be another cause? And the whole idea is, what the hell is an agent's decision? Is that even a thing? And that's the problem. Now we're biting down on it, Samuel. That's where we want to spend our time today. Does everyone see that? Are we implying that agentive decisions do not require cause? Yes, a whole ball of yarn, Pearl. That's where we want it to go. That's the problem. Type in clear if that's clear. That we're at it now. That's all we wanted to do. We wanted to get to okay, now the conversation begins. Like this is the problem. This is the problem. Yeah. And I'm hoping you'll never forget this closed fist. And you can have access to one anytime you want. You look down. And you look down at yours. I gave you a little experiment last week also to kind of do to prepare for today's class, and you can have fun with your fists, variation on that. All right, that's our problem. Before we go into the chapter that's going to explore it, there's other assumptions that are made in these other chapters, and the book has the wherewithal to flag some of them. I can't flag them all because there's a lot of assumptions that go into doing anything in philosophy. When you've studied ideas a lot, especially the history of philosophy. So this is a plug for the history of philosophy. Why study history of philosophy? Because history of philosophy makes you realize what are the assumptions being made in a given current debate. There's nothing more valuable than that. So let's say my work in philosophy of mind, I look at contemporary debates in philosophy of mind, but my work is heavily influenced by history of philosophy. In fact, I've got a book on a hard problem of consciousness, and it's part of a series called Studies in History of Philosophy of Mind. So because there's such a historical component to my work. Why is there a historical component? It's not that I'm a historian. It's when you look at the history of ideas, you're able to realize what are the forks in the road that exist, that we've all kind of agreed to take one fork as opposed to another. But holy cow, if we would have backtracked, there was this other possibility that we could have taken. It's not obvious, right? And so you don't know those options unless you know the options. And what I'm going to share with you now is assumptions that are being made in the chapter that you should be aware of, because if you ever find yourself annoyed and trapped and confused or would like to just think more critically and thoroughly about the issue, you should go back and you should examine those assumptions. Remember, assumptions just are premises that you're going to take for granted, for which you're not going to argue. You're just going to move forward with your argumentation. It doesn't necessarily mean your premises are false. I want to be clear about what we mean by assumption. Assumption just is a premise you're not going to actually defend. Nothing in that lack of defense implies that the premise that you're not defending is itself false. For all we know, it could be true, right? But you don't know because you haven't examined it. It's just an assumption. It's a starting point. You haven't actually produced a justification for it. So one of the value of knowing that an assumption is an assumption, sort of extracting out that implicit premise and making it explicit, is that allows you, if you're really, really stuck, you can check under the hood and say, okay, what have I assumed here? And maybe there's a false assumption there. that you're making, and that could be the cause of the problem. And so I just want to flag that, and that's a huge plug for why we should be studying the history of philosophy. That's a really, really important thing. Like when we talk about Plato and Aristotle, go back and re-examine. So here are some assumptions that are being made in this chapter. I've identified five unspoken assumptions that make free will a problem. I notice we call it the problem of free will, right? Or free will versus determinism. These things are a problem only if you accept these following assumptions. It's not obvious that free will is a problem at all if you, for whatever reason, discard some of these assumptions. Let's go over some of them. There's some of these, and I've classified them based on the chapters that we've looked at. Some of these assumptions you'll find familiar based on the chapter on material objects, when we're talking about composition, the chapter on causation, and then some just assumptions about method, like what is it to do philosophy. The first assumption is that things don't compose, at least not in the life-centered way suggested by Van Inwagen, or Schrödinger for that matter. So I talked about Erwin Schrödinger. Jason, you have your hand up. You can go ahead and type, my friend. Is that an accident, or did you have something you want to ask? No problem, my friend. So the assumption is that simples don't compose, at least not in the life-centered way suggested by Van Inwagen. I would say self-centered way, because it doesn't necessarily bring up life, but I kind of massage his view into something I feel a little more plausible when I discussed life and so on. And I was helping myself to Erwin Schrödinger's ideas. And you can go to Maturana and Francisco Varela and other theorists for this about what is life. Schrödinger wrote a book called What is Life? And I mentioned how we have good reasons to think, for instance, that organisms, not organs, organisms are genuine composed wholes, because there's something that they're capable of doing that otherwise other combinations can't do. And I made the example of let's say I chop you up into parts, and without loss, all of your parts are vacuum sealed in the meat section of your grocery. That's not you, right? You compose something more. You're able to do something called life because you reproduce your own materials, as well as the instructions for the reproduction that allows you to fight off heat loss and cosmic entropy. You're literally an exception to physics, and so the assumption in this book, in the chapter that we're looking at, is that, well, that's not appropriate. Like, this is just going to not take seriously Van Inwagen's suggestion that what exists are simples and living things, right? This is going to keep going. So we remember that when we did material objects, this was one possibility. The whole problem of free will doesn't start by taking that probability seriously. If it did, free will would be far less of a problem, right? That's the first one I want to flag. Is that clear? Does that make sense, everyone? Type in clear if that's clear, question, or if you have a question or comment. It's really important to know. We took a fork in the road there. That fork existed. We learned it. We studied it. That was one possible view on composition. Yeah. I'm glad there's so many thoughts, right? Pearl, that's why you come to me, right? So to get you a lot, and then it's like you can think on your own. You got decades worth of thinking after that, right? And so that's not going to take that fork in the road. If were you to backtrack, right? Why don't things compose? Well, they don't. I don't know. It doesn't say, right? That's an assumption. It's like, there you go. See, Brandon, that's the chapter is not going to go into the composition question and say things compose sometimes, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, so we talked about this person with the fist, right? That's a whole. It's like, well, there's something going on here. Well, what's going on, right? There's an important census, because if we go a little my red dot here, right? Does everyone see my little red dot? Type in yes if you can see my red dot. Right. So this is my matter tracker. So this person is in a room. There's air around them. Air is matter. They're not in a vacuum. They're not in a void. So every time you see my little red dot, I'm tracking what's there. Matter. Right? There was matter all throughout. Van Inwagen is going to want to say, but when I cross this over here, right? This was an important distinction to be made. There's the air on the outside, and then there's a boundary here, and there's an important reason for why we should be thinking that that's a whole. That there's this matter is different from the other matter. It composes, right? This person is made of matter. The air around them is made of matter, right? But that person is made of matter that composes into a whole. Right? And if you do that, that changes a lot of things. right? And I'm not going to go into what that would entail, Samuel. Yeah, so it's a bunch of more work would need to be done, but it's not obvious that it would be as problematic, and there might be avenues for solving that kind of stuff, and we'll discuss a few of them when we discuss what we call agent causation. Yeah. Yeah. And so there's lots of work for anyone. Anyone, by the way, if you ever want to become please don't. If you ever do want to become a professional philosopher and you want to make headway and progress on the free will problem, I would recommend you look into these assumptions, right? I mean, that's the way to go. That's what I do in my own work, right? I don't think that using the current terms of the debate and just pushing forward on those terms is going to generate anything more. We'll still be stuck in the same dead ends. The backtracking, you got to use the reverse, and you got to say, we took a wrong turn. Right? It's like if you're driving down to Mexico and you took a wrong turn and you're heading towards Nunavut, moving forward is not the way to go. If your destination is Mexico and you're literally, you took a wrong turn and you're heading in the opposite direction, you have to backtrack. Sometimes you have to backtrack. And backtrack means sometimes you got to go back and say, well, maybe this assumption was wrong. That's one of the assumptions that I reject. Right, I'm actually, obviously, you got a sense of what my own views would be on this stuff. Causation, here's another thing. Remember, in the causation chapter, we talked about what I call pull causes or final or teleological causation. Well, one of the assumptions in the chapter we're going to look at is that Aristotle's pull causes aren't worth taking seriously, leaving only push causes or efficient causation, like the dominoes. Right? I was having a conversation with Francisca, and Francisca was talking about a plant striving for light. Francisca, what was the technical term you use? She's in botany and agriculture stuff. What's the technical term for a plant when it strives for light? It tries to stretch. It's stretching towards a goal. She had a beautiful term for it. Etiolation, when they start to stretch and get a bit deformed, it's really cool. So you've all seen this, right? Plants are seeking light. Seeking looks a lot like a pull cause. Like it certainly does. That looks like real evidence for a pull cause. And Aristotle, who's both the founder, you're smart when you're the founder of a science. You're ridiculously smart when you're the founder of two sciences. Aristotle is the founder of logic and biology. Well, think about that. If you're a logician, the person you go to, the great-great-grandpa OG logician is Aristotle. And if you're a biologist, the first biologist is Aristotle. Holy bloody cow. Like, you're smart when, all right? So Aristotle, who's no slouch, he was the mind. Yeah, and you'd think, right, these are very different fields. No, not for a genius like Aristotle. No problem there. He was doing what we call natural philosophy. The only time we got a genius to his equal, I think, was when we had Charles Peirce, who, is aptly called the American Aristotle. So it took us 2,000 years to get another one like him. But it's like, this was a thing. He thought this was a thing. He put it in his Metaphysics, right? This chapter is going to assume no. So the contemporary discussion of the free will debate assumes that the only causes are push causes, so the dominoes. And you can see where that would be a problem. Go back to our opening hand, right? If you're looking for pushing the hand open as opposed to it being pulled, very different reason. If the hand is gripping, striving for something, and it opens because there's an agent that has a goal that's going for that cup, that mug of coffee, that's. And again, you have to ask yourself, what's the honest answer to say here? When you reach for your bottle, are you being pulled or being pushed? I'll leave that for you to answer. But here, it's assumed from the get-go that the pulling stuff's a no-go. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. Yeah, I would agree with that. And not just in psychology, but in philosophy, right? Especially in philosophy. The psychology stuff, you used to call it teleonomy, which is like trying to get all of the benefits, but none of the ontological commitments. So it's still, teleology, by the way, is still a four-letter word in a lot of fields. And if you use teleology, they say, no. You have to say teleonomy, which is basically teleology, but we don't actually want to commit to its ontological implications, right? So they say teleonomy. It's like, Francesca, anybody heard the word teleonomy? If you've done some biology and your prof tells you it's not teleology, that's spooky. That's spooky action at a distance. What you got to believe in is teleonomy, which is really cheap, right? That's like, okay, but how, right? It's like the ersatz modal realism. It's like, it's just make-believe. Yeah, right? And you get all the benefits, though, but it's not miraculous. Here's another assumption. Yeah, apparent. So it's your Pearl just looked at apparent purposefulness, right? Just apparent. And apparent's your get out of jail free card. Because metaphysics, you just, it's just apparent, right? But you get everything. You get everything, all the benefits, but none of the drawbacks. Because you use the adjective apparent. Problem solved there, Pearl. Can you imagine? I find that cheap. Just want to put that out there. People who use this apparent crap. It's like, man, that's a cheap move. It's like, I don't want to deal with what I'm like, with any of my problems. Yeah. Audio issues. Is everyone hearing me well? Type in yes if you are, because Melissa's having some audio issues. Okay, so type in the audio is good. So Melissa probably can't hear me saying it. So audio is good. Type in audio is good. Cool. All right. Thank you. Here's another assumption. The relata of causal connections are events, not things. This is what's being assumed, right? So we talked. There's a part in the chapter on causations. What's actually happening? Is it an event that's succeeding another event, or a thing that's affecting another thing? So think of the billiard balls. And we were talking about events in the chapter. But you could be talking about things, but this is kind of related to what we're saying here. Things don't compose, right? So there's a kind of a hesitance to talk about things. So we'll talk about events instead. And then if you want to have the hand open, you don't want to say that it was caused by a thing, because that could include an agent, or you want to say something like a thing, and your events, right? There's events happening. So the dominoes down the nerves would be events, right? So neural events and so on. That's an assumption being made. Right. Again, if you ever find yourself stuck, go back and question those assumptions and see if things change. I submit that they might. Is that clear, everyone? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask a question. And there's so much. We could do a deep dive into all of these. If this was a course on free will and determinism, we could literally structure the whole course on saying, here's the modern debate. Doesn't it look like a dead end, and why? And then actually go back to all of these 5 assumptions and then do some history of philosophy to say, how are things? They do try to address one briefly in the text, and that's the next one that we're looking at. The laws of nature set what events we observe, not events set the laws of nature we infer. That's my formulation. I think it's nice and crisp. Samuel, that's the one they discuss in the text. You recognize it? When we talk about Humeanism about law, right? What is a law, right? It's the laws of nature and so on, right? The book does mention that one. That's the one that they do mention. The other in the cause, this is all things that were mentioned in the previous chapter. In the one on free will, this is mentioned on number 4 here. And notice there are forks in the road, but it's always like, okay, we're going to take this one. That's the one to go. All right, it's a fork in the road, but we're going to take this one. This one is they leave it a little more open because it's still like it's not obvious. We got Hume and Lewis pulling on either sides. Hume is saying one thing and David Lewis is saying another, and those are heavy hitters, so people take that seriously. No problem. You take care, Jason. Kick some butt, all right? So this is one of the assumptions that's being made. And so that formulation, I want to unpack it. I think it's pretty crisp. Meditate on it and read the book. But the idea is that, well, we talked about this a little briefly, right? So let's say I see, I don't know, here's a mother and she's giving birth to a baby. So MB, right? Mother gives birth to a baby. It's something that's fresh in my mind. I suppose when I'm trying to make an example on the go, you go to those, right? Mother making a baby, and so on, right? And you think, well, there's obviously something going on that's complicated, right? And the thing is, these are all instances, let's say, of some greater principle, right? Some greater law, like something that governs it. And the question is, what's the direction of fit? Is it that there is a law and it goes like this? I'm actually going to give this a different color just to flag it, right? Is it that the law governs the instances, right? Or is it that we infer the instances from a law? Is it purple or pink, right? And those are 2 very different ways of looking at the relation between the concrete and the particular, right? Is there an abstract law that governs the particular instances? Or are we using particular instances to infer, fallibly as the case may be, the abstract law? And let me give you an example of how that can be a big deal, right? And again, pink or purple. We can take a poll if you want. Amber just ventured pink. You tell me, pink or purple? Is there a law that governs the instances, or do the instances allow us to infer a law? Again, bullshit. Just say it. You haven't owned it. That's cool. It's not like by saying pink or purple, you know what the hell you're saying. But just let's take a poll. Let's take a survey of our intuitions. I won't ask you why. I won't put you through that. We use instances to infer loss. Orion, you'd be the pink stuff. The arrow goes that way. I guess the way we should go about it is purple, but in reality it's pink. Yeah, I mean there was historically, by the way, this is how it worked, right? So this is the world of this. Historically, this was lost in the West and other places as well, as this is the world as God sees it, right? And God goes down, like God's the purple thing. God knows the laws, and then that's what governs the world that we observe. We're the world of humans. We're obviously don't have access to God's blueprint, so we're fallibly reconstructing God's blueprint, essentially. So we have to use, that kind of captures the thought that Abigail just said, right? I guess the way we should go about it is purple, but in reality it's pink. It's like for us humans, us mortals, we have to infer the laws from the instances, but God knows that the law governs the instances. Does that make sense, Abigail? Does that capture your thought? Just historically, that's a nice kind of way of understanding it. Like omniscient, an omniscient being would know exactly what's going on and see the pattern. And you can kind of have fun with this and make a lot of sense of this, by the way. Let's imagine I give you a following sequence. I'm going to say, I'm going to write something down, and I want you to come up with the next thing I'm going to say. Tell me what should put for the question marks. Logical sequence 1, 3, 5, and do this without looking at the chat independently. 21. Why 21? I guess you cracked the code, Andre. You cracked the code. What's the cipher? What's the code? Increments of 2, right? So n plus 2. Right? This would be the law of nature right here in this case, right? N plus 2. All right, so let's wait and see what the what is it going to be? Drum roll, please. Can I have a drum roll? Because I'm about to give you the next number. All right, drum roll. It's 24. What just happened? It's 24. It's already there. You can observe it's too late. It's 24. What happened? You misinterpreted the law. What was the law, it turns out? So Pearl says you misinterpreted the law. What are there some explanations? What's going on? I mean, if the law is n plus 2, this would be a miracle. Tristan, I love that. Yeah, beautiful. Maybe don't apply to numbers less than 20, but could be wrong. So it'd be like, if n is less than 20, then n plus 2. Beautiful, Ryan. And if the number is more than 20, then what's the new rule for that? What do we do for that? What's the addition rule for that? If it's more than 20, then you do plus. It's a different law, and ostensibly it looks like, well, there could be no law and everything could be, but there's enough regularity to say that there's regularity. You agree that this is not random? We can compress this at least. There's informational compression. I can reduce this to a formula smaller than the set that allowed me to formulate the compression. Yeah, there's informational compression here. Yeah, it does some regularity. And look, this does capture it perfectly. It's if it's if it's less than 20. Oopsie, I want my other thing. So it turns out the law was different. If n is less than 20, right, then it's plus 2. And if n is more than 20, let's say, it's, well, let's just go for n plus 5 because I added 5 to 19, right? If it's gonna veer over the let's say the threshold, then it's n plus 5 or something like this, right? Or some n plus 4 or whatever, right? It's a different rule, but it was more complicated, right? And of course, as you have more instances, and now here's where it makes a difference. Look at what I said in 4. The laws of nature set what events we observe, not events set the laws of nature we infer. The view taken in the chapter, right, is we're going to flag that, but this makes a big difference on whether or not you're going to think free will is a problem. It's going to make a big difference. Huge difference. Because you could, for all intents and purposes, say something like this, right? Let's go back to my hand. So not only can you say, well, this is a whole, right? What's going to happen next? So here's all of the history of humankind up to the moment where this person is about to either, because they could show two fingers, right? They could do a peace sign. They could do the middle finger. They could open all four hands. All right. So let's call these options like 1, 2, 3. How many fingers is this person going to show? So let's say I give you the history of all of the human history. I'll get to Amber's question in a second. So this timeline here is the complete history of the universe. So ... on this side. All right. Are we happy with that? So let me just say clear if that's clear. This is a timeline. It's the whole history of the universe up to that point. Type in clear if that's clear. This is a timeline at the bottom. It's the whole history of the universe up to that point. Big Bang to now. All right. So look at my hand. Imagine I had a hand, right? How many fingers am I going to put out? And what you want to say, well, look, the determinist is going to want to say facts plus the laws of nature equal whatever you're going to do next, right? So let's say, for instance, it should, well, we can't tell because we're not God, right? We can't tell. But in principle, the facts at hand, so the given state of where you are at time t now, here's my current moment, right? All those facts plus the laws of nature should equal what's going to happen next. And let's say it turns out that the person did the peace sign, right? So all they did was took out two fingers, and they ended up taking out two fingers. Well, yeah, right? There you go. That was predicted by the whole history of the universe and the laws of nature. But here's the question. What are the laws of nature? And if you go back to the assumption I just made, are the laws of nature inferred from their instances, or do they govern the instances? And if you go back to the example I just gave you, when all of a sudden we went from, 17, 19, it was 24, right? That L is not as obvious as you might think it is. And so maybe this is perfectly consistent, right? To open, let's say you thought they were going to open one finger, and you know what? They're giving you the middle finger. Right? They're surprising you. It's not this. Just like I did with my surprising number, they're taking out one finger. Ha! Take that. And he said, well, you can't violate the laws of nature. I don't violate the laws of nature. I'm inventing them as I go. Let me say that again. If I do this, I don't violate the laws of nature. I'm making them as I go. And you can see the example I just gave with the numbers a moment ago, right? What's the next number that's going to come, right? Everything's going to hinge on what view you have of this, right? The laws of nature set what events we observe, not events set the laws of nature we infer. What was the n plus 2, right? Did you get that right? Or are each instances basically, every time you have a new instance, determining how it's actually going to unfold? And you could easily have n plus 2 except, that could totally be a rule, by the way, except when it comes to 31. That could be totally a rule, by the way. Maybe it's not elegant, maybe it bothers you, maybe you think God would never make such a rule. It's like it's n plus 2 except for the number 31. That number, that's fine. Everything else after that, everything that goes before 31, it's n plus 2. Everything that comes after 31 is n plus 2. But if you put me 31 as my input, the output would be something else. It'd be like 31. It'd be n plus 6. So you plug in an input. So if I plug in, if that's the rule, if what I have in purple is the rule, right? And I give you the number 20, what should I output? My input is 20, what should be the output, except according to this rule? I plug in 20, what should happen? So the whole history of the universe gets you to 20. The rule is it's n plus 2 except 31. In case it's 31, it's n plus 6. So I say 20 should be 22. Yeah, because the rule says unless it's 31, it's n plus 2, that number plus 2. So 22, correct answer. If I give, let's do 18, what should be the output? The whole history of the universe brings me to 18. No big deal. It should be 20. Cool. And I say it's 31 now. What should be the output? 37. That's it. It's 32. What should be the output? 34. Because it's except 31, it will be plus 2. Exactly. Yeah. And notice this may bother you, right? Maybe you think n plus 2 is really sweet and elegant, right? But you could be in a position, again, this is why these assumptions make a lot of lifting in the free will debate. Look down at your hand. Look down at your fist right now. Are you going to do the middle finger, the peace sign, the thumbs up? Tell me in the chat what you chose to do, or what you were forced to do. Pulled or pushed, I don't know. Rock and roll, middle finger, rock and roll sign, the devil sign. Yeah. Did a thumbs up before you said it. Did all three, did you open all five? And the question is, are you answering to the laws of nature or determining the laws of nature as you go? My friends, how's that for a crack cocaine question? This is messed up. I promise you this class would be messed up. Are you obeying the laws of nature, or are you writing the laws of nature as you go, producing yet another instance from which we'll infer what we think the rule might be? It's like, that's number 4 right there. Yeah. Yeah, we'll mention briefly the sort of Vannegar's, all the stuff. Yeah, a little bit, just a little bit, but not a cognitive science class stuff, right? So yeah, just a bit. My friends, is 4 clear? Messed up, but clear, right? Can everyone see that? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask a question. That's a substantial assumption here that's being made. If you change those assumptions a lot, it's a game changer, right? Yeah, well, that's the thing. It could be something else, right? And does we need to be a law to be without, like, it's still without exception. You understand, Samuel? Like, if I say n plus 2 unless it's 31, it's without exception. You see that, Samuel? It's still a law. It's ugly. You don't like it. Maybe you think God wouldn't have that aesthetic. Still without exception. And it's like, it's n plus 2 except for 31, 78, and 1013. Yes, but that's not making exceptions. It's making a more complicated law. Do you see that, Samuel? The word exceptions here is inapplicable. It's not an exception. Turns out that the law is more complicated than you thought. You see that? That's what I'm inviting you to think about. It's like, yeah. Oh, that's not true, though. That's a non sequitur. That doesn't follow. That doesn't follow one bit. Yeah. It only follows if you're bothered aesthetically by it, because it doesn't compress as well as you thought. Like, just if you have an image and you try to compress it with a zip file and it doesn't compress well, because there's a lot in there that's not, it'll be information loss if you compress it too much. It's too bad, so sad. It's just the way it is. If we did information theory, I could really unpack that. All right, and here's the final assumption. Verbal arguments are more trustworthy than first-person experience. In other words, analytic logic, not continental phenomenology, is the proper compass of philosophy. That's an assumption that the whole book makes. So it's like, all right, so last night you dreamt you were a cowboy. Say yes. Go with me on this. Last night you dreamt you were a cowboy. Go with me on this. Say yes. Go with me. Agree? Go with this thought experiment. Cowboy, cowgirl, whatever, right? All right. Cat, the whole thing. Chaps. All right. I'm going to show you brain scans and arguments, not to explain what in fact that reduces to, but to show you that you're wrong. You didn't dream you were a cowboy, cowgirl. What are you going to trust more? My presentation or what you actually experienced? I show you a lot of images. Watch out. You sit down for the next hour. I'm not telling you that, what you actually meant. Okay, so you dreamt you were a cowboy, cowgirl. And imagine I'm going to show you a presentation. I'm going to give you arguments and slideshows and pie charts and brain scans. And I'm going to say, not what that meant was something else. That's Freudian analysis. Not that it actually reduced to these neural happenings. But I'm going to say, no. You didn't dream you were a cowboy or cowgirl. Who are you going to trust more, me or you? I mean, if it was a good argument, but think about that, right? It's like, it seems that your experience sets the finish line that I have to reach, not the other way around, right? But how would you fail to know it's correct, that it at least seemed to you that you were dreaming of being a cowboy? I'm not saying you are a cowboy, that it at least seemed to you. This is where the seemings matter, right? That's what phenomenology is. It's the study of the seemings. Oh, memories are unreliable, so fair enough, man. So let's look at right now, look at the white ceiling. Go up and look at the white ceiling right now. And imagine I'm going to give you an argument, not that it misrepresents that. It doesn't even seem to you that you're looking at the white ceiling. Who are you going to trust more, me or you? It doesn't even seem to you that you're looking at the white ceiling. Who are you going to trust more, me or you? Definitely yourself, right? Well, that says there's no class of argument that could ever succeed in showing that seeming wrong. That's a big, big, big deal. And you have a whole other approach to philosophy that's called phenomenology. That's part of what we call continental philosophy that says that actually should be the method. You should actually be studying those seemings with excruciating detail, right? And as good as logic is, it can never overturn those, right? You can say all sorts of things about the seeming doesn't indicate what I would expect it to indicate and all that crap, but like this is a thing. This is a thing, and this is a huge assumption. Now, of course, go back to your fist, look down at your fist. Man, you're in charge when you open that hand, huh? Like you have first-person experience of agency. You know exactly what it is. Like you and I, we're not vases. You know what it's like to be a hand. Like I wonder what it's like to be a vase. Fair enough, but I don't wonder what it's like to be, a hand opening. I know what it's like. I am one. Right? Kit Fine's an idiot. I love Kit Fine. It's all good, but he's a complete idiot. His dismissals of the continental tradition they're worth laughing at. It's hilarious. Yeah. All right. So those are the assumptions, and I'm going to be upfront. I think all 5 assumptions are bogus. So if you were to sit me down and say, Professor, I happen to have hold of a real philosopher. I'd like to know what your views on the free will determinism debate are. I wouldn't be making any of those assumptions. And so we'd be having a very different conversation than you'll have in most of your classes or that chapter. Because I reject that things don't compose. I reject that Aristotle's pull causes are bogus. I actually think they're legit. I don't think that the relata of causal connections are always events that can be things because things can compose. I think that the events set the laws of nature that we infer and not the other way around. And I don't think that logic is necessarily the go-to thing for everything. And I've got a completely different methodology that I employ in philosophy. Yeah. I mean, wouldn't that be great though, right? That'd be arrogant. I got to be dead before that happens. Isn't that stupid though, Pearl? Right? Like I'd have to die before we could do that. That's kind of like the way. I'd be the one, like while I'm alive, you think I'm the go-to person to unpack all this stuff. You'd want to take advantage of it. But I have to work my ass off, and only when I'm dead, the day after, you can make a course to do that. Only if you're at a top university can you force your students to read your own work, right? Yeah, it's very strange. But does this sound fun? Like was this helpful, my detour? Because I'm giving you my sort of analysis of things you should keep in mind, right? Because you might want to backtrack. And notice, anyone ever taken free will and determinism? It's a course at KPU. Brian Garrett teaches it often. I taught it, picked it up for him. Yeah. Okay. So if you just keep this slide in mind, if you take it, just keep the slide in mind and go back, and you're going to see how all of these assumptions are being made and never argued for. Right. Cool. Yeah. There you go. Are you doing the Kit Fine stuff, Amber? And what are you folks talking about Kit Fine? There's like he hates continental philosophers. He thinks like his opinion is so low, it's just ridiculous. Yeah, cool. All right. That was it, man. That's what I wanted to talk about. Is everyone ready for the chapter now, given that we know all the forks in the road that have been taken that haven't actually been paid for? Is everyone ready for this chapter? Cool. Let's do it. And I'd love, by the way, to just teach philosophy without. I wish it wasn't felt as arrogant if I shared you my thoughts. Like if we could just grab a walking stick and just go on a stroll, and I could share with you my thoughts as they occur and argue. Like, not I'm a big guy with a beard. You have to listen to me because look, I have a beard. No, it'd be like, here's a great argument. You might really want to consider that. Tell me if I did something move wrong. Like these seem acceptable premises, and the logic seems to dictate that you'd have to accept that. Like when I invited you to look up at your ceiling, it's like, yeah, I think that'd be a great field trip idea. That's how Aristotle taught, right? He walked around and called it the peripatetic school. He wasn't actually in the academy was like a place. Aristotle just walked around, right? Yeah, it would be great. I'd love to do that kind of teaching. KPU, oh crap, yeah, KPU farm, count me in. Set that up and I'm game. If people want to show up, Francisco wants to set up a farm, and you folks want to do some philosophy at someplace nice, and you all bring your A game, count me in. I'll literally show up, especially if it's Langley or something like that. Yeah, definitely. I'm down with that. And you can invite your friends too, no tuition. I won't bill you, right? Just buy me a coffee or something. Parts of the chapter. Let's do this. Let's do this. I love you folks. You're so cute. Let's do this chapter. This is our chapter 8 on free will. And again, I'm trimming parts here just for the sake of doing this. So until now, we focused on the metaphysical issues that concern objects considered in a very general way. We've discussed fundamental issues in ontology, the nature of time, modality, and causation. However, there are a host of other issues in metaphysics that are not quite so general, but concern some important features of a more narrow class of entities. One metaphysical issue that has been incredibly interesting to philosophers for centuries is whether it's possible for persons to have free will. Are the actions of ordinary human beings like ourselves ever truly up to us? Do we ever have any control over the types of things we do and the kinds of people we are? Typically, these philosophical questions arise out of worries that there exists some threat to our having free will. Sometimes, and it's not something you're going to see in the book, the threat comes in the form of a god or other deity who, it is suggested, might be controlling our natures and our decisions about what we do. By the way, I want to, just so you know, flag another historical thing. All of you know determinism as it's being taught by your profs, right? But there's a variety of determinism that's called fatalism. And fatalism is very different. I'll tell you what it looks like just really quickly, because I think it's really attractive and it's forgotten. And I think it's one that has a lot going for it. Fatalism is this. This is you acting through time. And there's a moment that's going to have to happen. Let's say that's your death. You're fated to die, by the way, no matter what you do. And meanwhile, you got lots of freedom. So you're going to do this, right? That's one possibility. You're going to do this. You're going to do this. You got lots of freedom, right? You're going to do this. You're going to do this. But there's an end point, right? And no matter what you do, it's your fate. That point, I'm going to put it in black, right? That's your fate right here, right? If you read Oedipus Rex, right? No matter what happens, right? There's this bottom line. It's gonna end up happening. The oracle will tell you what that dot is, and then you're free to do what you want, right? But no matter what happens, I'm telling you, the oracle's prediction is going to come true. You're going to end up at that dot. So I'm going to be the oracle for you. You're going to die. So you're fated to die. And the thing is, there's an element of determinism here because, look, there's nothing you can do to escape that. You're not free in that sense. Notice all of those lines converge at that dot. But you've got some elbow room in the meantime. Like how are you going to live your life? There's freedom there. And that's called fatalism. It's a technicalism that you never hear discussed in analytic philosophy because analytic philosophy prides itself on not being historical, right? But holy cow, that's a really interesting way of understanding determinism. And it does look like a very interesting way also of combining free will and determinism. You got free will, but there are these points, right, that you're fated to just kind of go, right? It's death. Well, death is the best example I can give you because I know for certain you're fated to die, Samuel. And so I get that example from the American Aristotle, Charles Percy says, fate is not a mystical concept. We're all fated to die. Almost a literal quote there, right? It's like, yeah. And there could be other events, but I only need one, right? So you only need one. You see that, Pearl? So for fatalism to work, right? Death and taxes, that's two, right? But you see that? Like I only need one. Death is the greatest example I can use, right? And for all we know, right, that's the correct way of understanding what it means to have free will and to be determined. It's a compatibilist view. You got free will, yeah. And this is never, okay, here's what you're looking at right now. I'm sorry to be, because this issue, I care obviously about all the issues in this book, but this one is very close to my heart. It kind of sucks to have to teach you a book and nowhere at any point, to my mind, the coolest perspectives ever get discussed. Short of a brief mention of Roderick Chisholm and agent causation, which is like a paragraph. This is a bloody cool way of understanding compatibilist views of free will and determinism. Like you can have free will in a deterministic world. The deterministic world has some moments where, everything has to happen, like memento mori, right? It's like, but in the meantime, like open your hand, close it, show me how many fingers you want. It's like, and this is a thing that the ancient Greeks discussed, in it you find in non-Western traditions. And the thing is, it typically comes with an apparatus, which is like a godlike thing that has set your fate. But you don't need that. Like, take my death thing. Do I need God to have the death point? Yes or no? Proof me, everyone. Proof me philosophically. I put my red dot. It's death. Do I need God? It's like, no. There you go. There's no designer. There's no intent. It's like, I don't need any of that. But holy crap. It seems to me like ridiculously plausible. That's called fatalism. No one discusses it. What do you folks think? Again, I'm sorry to warp your mind with perverting you and teaching you all these forbidden ways, but it's like you'll never learn this in school. I don't know why you'll never learn this in school. You'd learn it if you did classics, and then it would be only literature. Yeah. Like, isn't that suck? Like, why are literature students learning more about this than you are? Like, it's a really darn good description of the human condition, right? Anyways, it's like, and if you think, well, my agency, and this is how it ties in with the life stuff, right? If you think, well, my agency ties into my being composed and my having this ability to combat entropy, my combat will eventually lose. It's by definition a lost battle, but I can postpone the loss of my battle as long as I can, called life, right? But I will eventually die because I'm mortal, and that's what it means to be mortal. And in the meantime, I'm combating heat loss and able to do something like moving my hand and showing you the middle finger, right? And it's like, holy crap, I agree, Francesca. Like, there's a boatload of wisdom in these things, but they don't get taken seriously by analytic philosophers for all sorts of reasons I can't get into. Yeah, that was another aside, right? That fatalism is not even worth discussing. So that sucks. Yeah. All right. And so here the God crap doesn't, the deity and the God crap, just so you know, we don't need that in there. Yeah. So other times, this is the problem that will concern us here. The threat comes from impersonal and universal laws that govern everything that happens. So there's a fork in the road here, and we're clearly going to be taking that fork in the road. The metaphysical issue then concerns how to reconcile the sense that we are free agents with the existence of God or the laws, and clearly we're just going to be talking about the laws. Or if it is not possible, the job of the philosopher becomes to assess the important implications this has for the way we must see ourselves and the relationships we have to our environments and other human beings. So that's a nice setup. I like it. And at least, the author tells us these are these possibilities, but yeah, like, no. So the main issue of this chapter is whether in any important sense, any of our decisions or actions are up to us. This is what it means to say an agent's action or decision is free. It is up to that agent. It comes from her and not from someone or something else. So when we had our fist, hold on, right? Where does the decision to open the fist, right? It comes from you, right? And that would be what it would mean to be free, right? You're the author of that. You're the thing in charge of it. Now, although there may be no evil neuroscientist controlling what I care about and what makes me happy, my desires and dispositions were shaped by factors beyond my control. The circumstances in which I was raised as a child, the norms of the society in which I live, the education I've had up until now, the books I have read and the movies I have watched, all of these things have constrained the type of person I am now, influence what I desire, and what it is that makes me happy. And clearly all that's true. If I weren't subject to these constraints, would I still desire what I do? Would these things still make me happy? It's hard to know, but it's also hard to avoid thinking there may be a deeper freedom of the will to be had. This deeper sense of freedom is what we mean when we talk about our being the ultimate source of our own actions, our own will and actions. We are now going to consider a reason to think it's lacking, even if somehow we could know we're not under the control of evil scientists and are not shaped in some problematic way by our environments, like you can imagine mind manipulation or brainwashing. When metaphysicians today worry about there being a threat to our free will, the main threat they worry about comes from the laws of the universe constraining our choices and actions. And you can see here that assumption number 4 that we talked about. This comes from the epistemic possibility, the possibility given that what we know, that the basic laws of the universe are deterministic. This means that the laws are such that, given any complete state of the universe at a time, and facts about what the laws are, it is possible in principle to deduce what the complete state of the universe will be at any later time. That's what I said a moment ago, right? We had a timeline. Here's a history of the universe. That's the F, the facts, plus the laws, how those facts kind of affect one another. And then you can equal, right, a prediction about what's going to happen next. And that prediction is 100% certain. Given that any past or present state of the universe, the laws determine what the future holds. How would determinism in the laws threaten free will? The rough idea is very simple. If determinism is true, then this means that the choices and decisions you make now, indeed everything you've ever done, were determined by states of the universe that occurred long before you were born. In fact, if determinism is true, and there was, as cosmology suggests, a Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago, it was already determined then what kind of person you are and what you will be doing right now. None of these facts then about who you are and how you act, it would then seem, are up to you. Given the laws and the facts about this early state of the universe, you couldn't have been any way than how you actually are. You couldn't have done anything else. So earlier, someone said, was it Andre did the heavy metal sign? It's like you couldn't have helped yourself. That was settled a second into the Big Bang, right? As the sort of deuterium was spreading at insane speeds, right? It's like, well, at that time, he's going to put out his two fingers that way. This reasoning was articulated very clearly in a famous argument by Peter Van Inwagen. This is the consequence argument. By the way, he's articulating this argument because he's going to disagree with it. So just so you know, with some backstory. Its aim is to demonstrate the incompatibility of free will and determinism. Here's one way of presenting this argument. The consequence argument. Bashi is going to agree with it, but not to defend the determinism, just to flesh that out. There is nothing we can do now to change the past. It's a darn good premise to start with. I'm going to say that's true. There's nothing we can do now to change the laws of nature. We'll eventually unpack that a little bit more. Therefore, there is nothing we can do now to change the past and the laws of nature. That's just combining 1 and 2 and saying and. If determinism is true, then our present actions are the necessary consequences of the past and the laws of nature. Notice that's an if claim. So if it's true, then these consequences follow. Therefore, if determinism is true, then there is nothing we can do now to change the fact that our present actions are the necessary consequences of the past and the laws of nature. Therefore, donc, if determinism is true, then there is nothing we can now do to change the fact that our present actions occur. Therefore, if determinism is true, then no one has the power to do otherwise than what one actually does. Free will requires the power to do otherwise. Therefore, if determinism is true, then no one has free will. That's the argument. Pretty well stated for what it's worth. Van Inwagen's argument appears valid and rests on a few basic assumptions, all of which seem hard to deny. How could one deny that there is nothing we can do now to change the past or change the laws of nature? Similarly, the steps of the argument from 4 to 7 seem intuitive and difficult to deny. Van Inwagen's premise 8 is substantive. It involves a particular view about what free will requires. 8 says, free will requires the power to do otherwise. It assumes that for an action to be free, it's not merely enough that it is an action that is consistent with your desires, but also that it was one you were able to refrain from doing. But that seems intuitive too. Think of any putatively free action of yours. Say you had a bowl of cereal for breakfast. You didn't have to have that bowl of cereal this morning. You could have had eggs or a smoothie instead. You could have had none of those things and you started your day without breakfast at all. But what if it turned out that you couldn't have done otherwise? Something was constraining you so that you had to have that bowl of cereal. Then there's an intuitive pull towards thinking that maybe that action wasn't really free after all. It wasn't really up to you. What the consequence argument aims to show is that if the laws are deterministic, then given past states of the universe and these laws, you really could not have done otherwise. If you ate cereal for breakfast, you had to eat cereal for breakfast. And then it would seem to follow this, like all of the rest of your actions, it's not really free. It's not really up to you. Let me pause so far and ask if that's clear. If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question about this argument, you'd like to go over something, let me know. Excuse for me to fuel up, because I need some energy. I'm this living creature. Yeah, we're going to be touching on the modality stuff. Lewis is going to rear his ugly head. Well, beautiful head. Philosophers have not all been persuaded by this argument. But before we consider the main types of responses one encounters, We should try to see what one is committed to if one accepts the premises of this argument and follows Van Inwagen where he thinks they lead. There are two broad positions philosophers take today with respect to free will. Those who think, as Van Inwagen does, that free will is incompatible with determinism in the laws, and those who think free will is compatible with determinism. Those adopting the former position are called incompatibilists. Those adopting the latter are called compatibilists. I'm going to skip ahead and show you this beautiful diagram, which summarizes this really well. Is free will compatible with determinism? If you answer yes, you're a compatibilist. If you answer no, it's not compatible with determinism, then you're an incompatibilist. Then you ask this next question: is determinism true? If you say yes, then you're a soft determinist. That means you think it's compatible and determinism is true. No is a position that's not occupied, so there's no name for it really. Incompatibilist: is determinism true? Yes, you can't have both. And determinism is true, so by disjunctive syllogism, right, it's either one or the other. It can't be both, and only determinism is true, so therefore hard determinism. And well, look, you can't have both, so determinism is not true, and so you're going to end up with libertarianism. And these are the main positions: soft determinism, hard determinism, libertarianism. And notice that there's a variety of positions in here, right, that we haven't put. So we put fatalism, right? Where would fatalism fit here? It's not clear, right? Remember fatalism a moment ago? It's clearly a compatibilist view, right? You're going to have both determinism in that you're fated to die, but you're also going to have freedom, right? Does anyone see that? That the fatalism would be over here. It's a compatibilist view. It's part of that genus. Type in clear if that's clear. You had enough wiggle room while you were alive, but hate to break it to you, there's at least one event I know for sure. You're fated to die. But is determinism true on that view? That's not clear that it's a yes or a no. Like, what are your intuitions? According to the fatalist thumbnail sketch I gave you, do you think determinism is true? Like, what would you be forced to answer if you're a fatalist? You have to say determinism is true, I think, right? Because the death is going to happen, right? But notice how this is a version, I think of soft determinism, but you have so much wiggle room in between, right? You're not every event, because the way you sort of frame determinism, the formulation we just saw, and here's reasons for thinking you might want to say no, right? The formulation we just saw ranged over all actions. And fatalism is precisely saying there's a set of actions, a set of events that are determined, and there's some that aren't, right? It carves it differently. So it's not clear. You could put fatalism over here, and you can put it over here. It's not even clear that this makes any sense. Just so you know, this muddles the picture a little bit if you put in some other views. One of the reasons why this is nice and neat is because it's kept nice and neat. It's kind of like a hybrid. Exactly, right? One of the reasons why people in analytic philosophy love clear distinctions, but often they're clear because they keep them clear. Because if you suggest something otherwise, then they're like, no, shh, hush, 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 hush. Don't discuss such silly things, right? And so, yeah, just so you know, the views we were talking about a moment ago that I think are like worth flagging at any rate, it's not obvious where they would fit in here, right? But anyways, this is what the book's going to move forward on, right? Samuel says, well, that was my question about fatalism. How does anything determine if we're actually free? Wouldn't that negate the determined outcomes? I don't know, right? That's worth meditating on, right? There's a lot to be said. This is areas for further work, right? Like, it'd be nice for us to create a little slightly more open space to have. I mean, eventually you have to stop, right? There's a lot of views in philosophy, but I feel like if you're really pursuing wisdom and not pursuing a degree, right? You don't necessarily want to please your prof. You want to attain wisdom. You're going to go down whatever alley you're going to need to go down, including alleys that your profs don't discuss. I'm one of the rare oddities who will mention a thing like this, but it's not clear that this book will ever sort of know what to make with that, right? And Samuel's question is to the point, right? Like what do we do about that, right? So all that. Those are the views. Are we clear at least on this tree? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. Pretty nice tree so far as it goes. And you'd have to say that determinism, does it range over all events or just some, at least? You know, so that's and it seems to I have never discussed with a living philosopher, like someone I've actually met in the flesh, who took determinism to range over only some events, not all. So all determinists I've ever discussed determinism with, or non-determined, anyone for that matter, it's always like, well, if determinism is true, it ranges over all events. Not like some, like death, right? It's like that never happens. Like that's never a thing. And then that doesn't even occur. That you could demote it from all to some, that's not even a thought. But those are cool thoughts to entertain, whatever their merit, right? So here we go. And one way of understanding determinism is through what we call Laplace's demon, right? So Pierre-Simon Laplace imagined the possibility of a supremely powerful intellect, one capable of using this system to predict all future behavior. We may regard the present state of the universe as the effect on its past and the cause of its future. An intellect which at a certain moment would know all forces that set nature in motion and all positions of all items of which nature is composed. If this intellect were also vast enough to submit these data to analysis, it would embrace a single formula, the movements of the greatest bodies of the universe and those of the tiniest atom. For such an intellect, nothing would be uncertain. Bite down on the nothing really hard. Nothing would be uncertain, and the future, just like the past, would be present before its eyes. This hypothetical intellect is now known as Laplace's demon. But a good descriptor of that would be like God, right? God is supposed to be omniscient. I just want to flag something because I do some philosophy of religion. You've all heard of the idea that God is omniscient. God is all-knowing, right? Type in yes if you've heard that. Belief or not belief, right? You've all heard that description? So if God's all-knowing, does he know right now if you're going to go to heaven or hell? Well, that kind of sucks, huh? So nothing's up to you, really. Like let's say he knows you're going to hell. Yeah, I'd be determinist. But here's the thing, right? Don't we want to say that heaven or hell is based on your decisions? Like, what's the point? Wouldn't it be like really unfair to say, well, all of you people go to hell, go to hell. You people go to heaven before they've even acted? Like my baby girl, right? My baby girl. God knows where she's going to end up. She's even haven't got a chance yet, right? The promise of how do you reconcile? That's the philosophy of religion part I want to flag right now because it kind of looks like what we're looking at right now. How the hell do you reconcile the free will with the omniscience? One's got to go. I have to either be free, in which case I can surprise God, or God can't be surprised because he knows it all, right? In which case I'm not really free. I'm just being jerked around. Right? Yeah. So that's messed up. Just so you know, there's a lot there. There's a lot there, right? These debates are ancient and they deal on a lot of things. And so I like that they call it Laplace's demon because that would really be demonic, right? It's like, I know where you're going to go, Francisca. You're going to hell. And it's like, that's been settled since you were like day one, right? When you were born, like my own girl, right? Just so you know. And I hope you find that disturbing. When we do philosophy of religion, these are thoughts that, you don't hear a lot about outside of philosophy of religion because they're unhappy thoughts. Folks want to believe in both the omniscience of God and their free will, that they're set their own fate. And if they act well, they'll go to heaven. And if they act poorly, they'll go to hell. And that somehow that's dependent on their choices and decisions. It's like, good luck with that. Not if you're going to have an omniscient God. You can have a very knowing God, but yeah. So that's a nice kind of Laplace's demon is a nice, and I love that slogan. We may regard the present state of the universe as the effect of its past and the cause of its future. That's a nice slogan that encaptures really well the sort of determinism that this chapter will be interested in. My friends, is that clear? Type in clear if that's clear, and disturbing if that's disturbing, and confused if you're confused. And I love philosophy of religion, right? It's just so completely and disturbing, yeah. Because you spend if I could put you in a room for one afternoon and disabuse you of so much stuff, you wouldn't sleep for days, or it would be so sucky. All right, now there are some reasons independent of the issue of free will for thinking that perhaps determinism isn't correct. For speaking of quantum mechanics, here we go, quantum mechanics. Doesn't that theory tell us that the laws of nature are fundamentally indeterministic? And so even if we may be getting closer and closer to discovering the basic laws of the universe, this doesn't mean we're getting closer and closer to having the ability to predict what happens in the future with clarity. So here's the thing, right? The physics stuff is evolved. And now we've got veered into something really, really esoteric, which is quantum mechanics. Well, here are three possibilities. At first, it could be because there aren't any laws of nature in the first place, right? It could be that the universe is such a disordered, jumbled place of random facts that there are no such things as laws in any plausible sense of the word. So all you would get are rough regularities. That could be. A second, it could be that there are laws of nature, but they do not cover all the types of situations that may arise in our universe. Perhaps they say how an object will behave when there are no forces acting on it, but do not describe what happens when there are forces. Or perhaps there are laws of nature, but the local laws that describe what happens in this or that part of the universe here on Earth, or here in this part of the universe that we observe, and there are other parts of the universe for which there are not even local laws that apply. Finally, and this is what many physicists and philosophers think follow from quantum theory, there are universal laws that govern what happens everywhere and in all types of situations, but these laws do not describe what will happen as a matter of necessity. Instead, they only describe what will happen as a matter of chance. And now I'm going to use this opportunity to share with you. Let me go find the link here. Um, I'm a scholar of the American Aristotle, Charles Sanders Peirce. And I taught a class, a whole third-year course on Peirce. And we did, the last week was on his cosmology. And Peirce has a very super interesting view about this entire topic. I'm going to put the link here. If you ever want to look at that class, have a look. We built a universe. So we built a universe out of chance and habit, no law. So we have in this recording, click on it and let me know if that opens as a tab, right? We built a universe in our classroom based to illustrate Peirce's views based only on the ingredients of chance and habit taking. And have a look at that. If you want to do like not now, if you want to do a complete sort of spend 2 hours exploring a very, very different way of conceiving the universe, that makes a boatload of sense and that explains a great deal, have a look at that. Have a look at that. I'm sharing that with you. Keep that for yourself. Don't share it. But that's that's another class that I taught. So I'm going to share some stuff, by the way, with you. Hey, while I'm on the topic of sharing, let me give you some more goodies. There's because since you're opening up some tabs, if you want to see what I really, let's say, not what I really think about free will and determinism, but you want to think about this in the same manner that I think about it in another context. Click on this. This is a movie. Have a look at this movie if you've never seen it. This is a movie that has, if you will, free will and determinism as its main theme. Tell me if that opens up. Oh no, that's the same link I just gave you. Sorry, I just realized that's the same damn link. Cool, it's the same link. All right, try this one. Copy pasting here. Tell me if that opens up. That should be a movie. Free movie. It's on me. Yeah, you're gonna love this movie. Holy cow! And if you're interested in free will and determinism, this movie is actually about that. And if you want to hear what I think, if you really want to kind of debrief about that movie, have a look at this class I just gave you. This one's on YouTube. Click on that. This is me talking about the movie. You got to watch the movie first. If you don't watch the movie, the class you're going to see on YouTube won't make sense. So click on that. Let me know if that opens up. Yeah, there's a website. Yeah, you can watch the whole thing. Samuel, you did the philosophy of tech course. So you did it, right? Well, that was a mind-blowing thing. So have a look at all those goodies. That's really like, have a look at those. You're going to have such a good time thinking through these issues. And like I said, watch the movie first and then watch my lecture on YouTube. This is a course that we took. Samuel, what'd you think when we did that? Sorry for all the asides today, but it's week 13. I just want to have fun. Samuel did that philosophy of technology class, and we're talking about, if you look, like one of the things that we're learning more and more about as we learn more about genetics, for instance, is how much determinism might be right, and if so, what not, whatever. And so this goes straight to that, right? And so, yeah, mind bending. I agree. And so have a look at those. And there's the whole, by the way, the whole course is on YouTube. So if you want more beyond that, there's more. All right. So let's think about now ways of responding to the consequence argument. Like one response that seemed obvious to some is to question the validity of the move that Van Inwagen makes from his fifth premise. Here's the fifth premise once again. He says, if determinism is true, there's nothing we can do now to change the fact that our present actions are necessary consequences of the past and the laws of nature. And he moved from that to his sixth premise, which is if determinism is true, then there is nothing we can do to change the fact that our present actions occur. The inference of premise 6 follows not just from 5, but also from the earlier premise 3 that there's nothing we can do to change either the past or the laws of nature. Van Inwagen says the inference from 6 to 3 and 5 follows given a transfer of powerlessness principle. I love that expression. Look, if you can't do anything about X, and you can't do anything about the fact that Y is a necessary consequence of X, then you can't do anything about Y. This certainly seems intuitive. But David Lewis, here he comes, in his paper, Are We Free to Break the Laws? And it's going to go back to Samuel and I when we're talking about, am I giving you an exception to the laws? Argues that this reasoning fails. And this is a whole conversation we said a moment ago about n+2, right? We're going to see now how it applies. To see this, let's hold determinism fixed in the background and just ask what it takes for it to be true that you could change a fact about whether one of your present actions occurs. Earlier, we considered the case of someone, say you, having breakfast this morning. Now ask, is there something you could do to change what you had for breakfast this morning? Now, if the breakfast has already passed, then of course there's nothing you can do about it. But the real question, what is relevant to the issue of free will, is whether at the time when you were about to have the cereal, let's call that time t, could have made it so that you did not have the cereal. So Lewis asks, what would make it the case that you did not have that cereal this morning? And is it possible that you didn't have the cereal this morning? Now, in any usual sense of the word possible, of course, it's possible. This is, of course, a possibility that you did not have the cereal this morning, but had, say, a smoothie instead. But you may ask, is it a possibility that you did not have the cereal this morning and everything about the world was the same up until that time when you made that decision? I mean, think about this when we talk about nomic regularity theory. Would it be consistent with the laws of the universe for the universe being what it was up to that point, but instead of reaching for the cereal, you reach for the damn smoothie? Like, again, Lewis says, yes, there's certainly no contradiction in your past history being just the same up until time t, you're in front of the fridge, and then instead of choosing the cereal, you choose the smoothie. So you have all of the antecedent history of the universe. You have the laws, so facts F plus L, the laws. Like there's no violation of that, not on the face of it. Can everyone see that? Type in clear if that's clear. Like, you're having a smoothie. It's not like you're starting to phase through a wall. It's like you just had a smoothie. Like if eating a breakfast cereal is not miraculous, neither is drinking a smoothie. You're not phasing through a wall. You're not being at two places at once. It's like nothing weird, right? Certainly possible in a sense that we've explored when we're talking about modality. Now, what is true is that in a situation like that, something would have to give. If determinism were true, which remember is the background assumption we're making, then things couldn't have been just the same up until t, and the laws were the same as those as our world, and yet you chose a smoothie. But this is not the question. The question is whether there's a possible world in which things are just the same up until t, and yet you have a smoothie. This is possible. What we'll have to say is that at that world, there are different laws of nature. So it's n+1 except for 30, n+2 except for 31. Or n+1, n+2, but when you get over 20, it's n+5 or something like this, right? When you get over 19 or whatever. But this doesn't mean that anything outrageous happens, that you somehow have special powers to break the laws of nature at this world. And this is what we we're going to talk about earlier. There's nothing supernatural here, right? You're not breaking the laws, you're shaping the laws. The world in which you choose the smoothie is just the world at which the laws are different. It's just not that far of a world. It's not far off. And notice how our talk of modality is helping us make sense of that now, right? You have the actual world. Let me just draw our worlds again. This is the world that's our world. And you have these possible worlds, right? And you have, let's say, all of the facts leading up, and they've got their own histories, right? So that's F, that's all the histories of all the facts, F, that's all in our world. That's, from the Big Bang to that time when you were in front of the fridge. Holy cow, such a crucial moment in the history of the cosmos. What are you going to have for breakfast, right? And then you have all those facts. So of course, for each of these possible worlds, the facts are going to be different. So we agree with that. They're different. Some overlap, of course, not all different, but let's say, imagine close enough, they could all be closely the same, right? And then you have the laws. Well, what are the laws? What are the laws, right? And the thing is, well, maybe, the laws are perfectly allowing you in that other world to have a smoothie. So in this world, you picked a cereal. So F plus L equals C. Let's go put a C over here, right? Cereal. Let me zoom in. Sorry, that's outside my little bubble. I'm running out of space. F plus L equals C. And here, F plus L equals smoothie. Just had a smoothie. And of course, that either means the facts are different or the L is different, the laws. Who the hell cares? It's no big deal. Right? And essentially what you do is you just say, well, look, here I am, and I happen to be at this world because that's our world, right? And that's no different than saying I'm here, but I could have been there. It's no big deal. It's like you could have been there, right? It's like look outside your house, your window right now. Could you be outside? Yeah, I could. Are you there now? No. But could you? Yeah. Anybody bothered by that? It's like, no. There you go. My friends, is that clear? Does that make enough sense? If that makes sense, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. And it's nice that we have machinery to make sense. You can see this is David Lewis, right? He's in his own world. God bless him, right? He's teaching us to see things quite differently. And you gotta love weirdos like that. Because they're geniuses. They let us see the world differently. That account relies on the possible world's modality. Yeah. At least you could easily unpack it as rigorously as we can unpack all this other stuff about modality. Yeah, it's counterfactual. So yeah, you did. It's a counterfactual claim, right? You didn't have cereal, right? Sorry, you had cereal. You didn't have smoothie, but you could have had a smoothie. You could have had a smoothie, and then you unpack the could using all the machinery of the modality week, right? Pearl says, so if the events set the laws, then we can change part of the equation. Exactly. Pearl, you're shaping, and that's where we're going to get to the whole question of where's that direction of fit between the events and the laws, right? You're basically... if the direction of it is that the events set the laws we infer, not the laws govern the events, then you never know, right? You're shaping them. That's an exception to the rule. You make up another exception to the rule. Like maybe typically, and notice, okay, so this is interesting. So if you've seen Everywhere, Everything at Once, in order for them to jump worlds, they have to do something out of the ordinary. Right, like that guy. I remember the first time I saw someone doing out of the ordinary is he eats the stick of chapstick. He takes out the chapstick from his fanny pack. Does everyone remember that? If you've seen the movie, it's super memorable. It's like Short Round. Short Round. I don't know his name, right? For me, it's all Indiana Jones, sidekick. Grown up Short Round takes out his fanny pack, takes out the stick, and he does it. Like normally, you'd never do that, right? But who the hell cares? Does that violate the laws of nature? No. It's just, it turns out, that you give the antecedent history of the universe and he does something out of the ordinary doesn't make it supernatural. That's a nice slogan. Out of the ordinary doesn't make it supernatural. What do you need for free will? For doing something otherwise? You don't need supernatural. You just need out of the ordinary. You just need the ability to say, I could have done different. But of course, once you did, I just want to go back to where we were when we started, right? Let me just go back to when we started focusing on. Once the damn thing is broken, once the vase is broken, we've changed the goalposts. Right? And likewise, once you open your hand, we've changed the goalposts. But all you gotta have to make sense of this is that you can happen, which we know means it does happen. You're opening your hand in another world. Any big deal with that? No violation of the law of contradiction, no big massive change in the laws of physics or the laws of nature for that matter, right? Your fist can open means your fist does open just at another world. You just happen to find yourself here, not there, in the same manner that, you know what, you're here, not in your driveway. Does that make sense, everyone? As mind-boggling as this is, because I catch myself saying this and it's like completely messed up. Type in clear if that's clear. Question if you got a question. That's all you need for the premise that you could have done otherwise. I mean, it's a very limited intervention, but it does work on a crucial premise, right? I could have done otherwise. Yeah, I could have done otherwise. Of course, the moment you've committed to moving your hand in one manner, then it's that you've changed the goalposts now. It's a different hand, but I could have done otherwise. What do I need in order to be able to say I could have done otherwise? Just that. And all the machinery comes in to sort of do that work for us. Right, and it's nothing spooky in some sense, right? There's some spookiness elsewhere, but this is it. So now it's possible that you didn't have cereal this morning, right? Now this is where we were Lewis says that there's certainly no contradiction in your past history being just the same up until time t, and then instead choosing the cereal, you chose a smoothie. There's no contradiction, that's for sure, right? Now what is true in that situation is that something would have to give. If determinism were true, then things could have been just the same up until time t, and the laws were the same at those and at a world, and yet you chose a smoothie. But this is not the question. Remember, the question is whether there's a possible world in which things were just the same up until that and have a smoothie, and clearly this is possible. Now, at this point, there's a disagreement that was never resolved between the incompatibilist Van Inwagen and the compatibilist Lewis. The incompatibilists in general will think that Lewis is misunderstanding what the issue is in premise 6. For him, the issue is this. Given determinism and how things are up to t and the actual laws, we fail to have any power over to do otherwise than eat the cereal. So for Lewis to understand our freedom, we have to understand that part of what is involved in free action is in that sense that we have the freedom to break the laws, not in the sense of creating exceptions. And I love how this goes right back to what we were able to discuss independently. Not in the sense of creating exceptions in the actual laws of nature, which, as in premise 2, we deny is impossible, but rather in the sense of acting such that the laws of the world are different than what they otherwise would have been. Remember, maybe you were pissed off at the fact that after I said 17 and I said 19, right? And then it was, 24, right? Maybe that annoyed you to no end, right? Because it looked nice and neat, right? But I'm not breaking the law, n+2. I'm just basically just showing by the very fact, undeniable and observable, that that law was different than what we originally inferred. And that's where with that direction of fit happens. Lewis thinks the laws of nature are the sorts of things that are determined by what actually happens at a universe. And so if people act differently at a world, this will entail that the laws at that world are different. Van Inwagen seems to be assuming in the background a different theory of laws, where there could not be ultimately dependent on what people choose to do. Like that sort of, it's carved in stone. Like that n+2 is, you can't sort of violate that, right? And of course, why would you think that? Like if the direction of fit is that you've inferred that from the events, and then I give you a good reason to think that your inference was wrong, then it turns out there was n+2 only if it's under 19, otherwise it's n+5 or some crap like that. Can everyone see that? And I'm glad we had the discussion we did earlier. Can the disagreement between Lewis and Van Inwagen, is that becoming clearer? If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. You're not making an exception to the law. You're creating a token instance of the law as you go. And it's not like we have to get overly bothered by the fact that we chose a smoothie. And that's the humanism about law. There's a box here that I'm going to go into that you could unpack, right? And we talked about Hume when we talked about nomic regularity theory. There's a lot in this chapter, and I said that if we were doing a bunch of stuff, David Lewis's work is not accessible. It's professional level work. You might want to read stuff on him before. It'd be a big step up. Yeah, he writes clearly, but clearly and hard. So yeah, you might have a hard time reading that. I'm going to say that you can handle. I mean, you can't handle it. It's only so much we can do in class, and I'm mindful of the time. But there's we mentioned, and Pearl wanted to talk about the sort of Benjamin Libet. Pearl, do you know what Benjamin Libet is? Does that ring a bell? I'm assuming it might. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So if you want a gesture at this stuff, right? This brings us finally to the last group of views one finds about free will. This is to deny the phenomenon altogether. So there's no such thing as free will. We've already described a view called hard determinism. Recall, this is a version of incompatibilism in which one believes that determinism is true, and that as a result of reasoning like the consequence argument, one concludes that free will doesn't exist. A stronger position, one that is compatible with hard determinism, and I hate the fact that they use the word compatible, is a position the philosopher Dirk Pereboom has labeled hard incompatibilism. It's the view that, yes, free will is incompatible with determinism, but it's also incompatible with indeterminism, because in an indeterministic world, everything that happens is arbitrary, is a matter of chance, and so beyond anyone's control. The hard incompatibilist doesn't need to have a view about whether the laws of nature are deterministic or indeterministic. He will say that either way, free will couldn't exist. Like, let's imagine that somewhere in the ecology of your brain, when you make a decision, there's a coin flip. Like, I'm taking out a coin right now. I've got a coin. I kid you not. I got a coin. I'm about to flip it, right? It's heads or tails. Make a bet. You got 50-50 chance of being right. Make a bet. Heads or tails. Cool. All right, I'm about to flip it. About to flip it. All right, here I go. I flip it, slap it on my hand. It's a head, so it's a quarter. I see the orignal, the moose. So it's tails. It's tails. All right, cool. Yes or no? Straightforward. Yes or no? Can I credit myself with any sort of moral blame or praise for the outcome of this coin toss? Yeah, I agree. There's a third side. Only in philosophy class would we say such nonsense, but yeah. Can I credit myself with the outcome? Can I claim credit for it? Moral credit for the outcome? Or agentive credit for that matter? Right? Like, no, we all agree on that. Like, I can't say, haha, yay. Like, if I play this with my kids, this is when you know they're young. They're very excited. I showed coin. This is so beautiful. I'm going to share this with you. So I was in some park in Surrey last weekend, and I was playing coin toss with my kids and never seen this before. They'd have to guess, and then when they would win, they'd be super excited. Yes, I won, Dad. I won, and they felt like they deserved credit for it. Like if they called heads and they got heads, they were like, "Damn, yeah!" All right, and if they lost, they'd be like, "Damn, I lost." There was normative weight attached to the results. Like they thought they deserved credit to have won in a sense, like you won a soccer game or something, right? Like, yeah. Now we all know it doesn't take much to disabuse ourselves of that cute, wonderful folk metaphysics, right? That since this is completely random, yeah, like claiming credit for like a slot machine. If you play cards, it's a different story, right? But like we all know that that's not something that belongs to me. So let me ask. So let me just make a drawing here. And again, um, let me just kind of zoom in. That's not my drawing. Hold on. I just want to scroll down, give myself a space to work with. All right. So this was a moment ago. This was me. This is my nose. This is my mouth. All right. This is my hand, and I tossed the coin, right, and out it went, and it fell down, and it was, what did I say? Tails. It was T. I can't claim credit for this. All right. Let me ask you, if I'm not to be credited with any blame or praise as a result of that, like imagine I'm at the gates of heaven and hell, let's say, right? I've been neutral. Like Saint Peter stops me at the gates of heaven and hell. Saint Peter, if you don't know, I think is the person sort of guarding the gates of heaven and hell. I'm at the gates, right? And it can go two ways. I can either go to hell. Let me grab myself red here, right? I can either go to hell. Here's the doors of hell. That's bad. Or I can go to heaven. Light blue, I think, would be a nice color for heaven. That's the door for heaven, right? And Saint Peter is about to determine whether I go to heaven or hell. And let's say this is heaven. Oh, they all start with an H. That's gonna put a letter, but that's not helpful. Let me put a happy smile. Heaven's nice. Hell is not nice. Cool. And at the entrance, I'm asked to toss a coin, right? Depending on what I'm going to have, and it's like heaven or hell. And I put it falls on the H side. H again. That's not helpful. What am I doing? I have to put my bad face because it's all hell. And my coin toss lands on the unhappy side. Right? My coin toss lands on the unhappy side, and I'm going to hell. Up until that point, I was completely neutral. Like I was a really nice guy. Did nothing wrong. Did nothing extraordinary. So I'm not Hitler and I'm not Mother Teresa. I'm just right smack down the middle, and I go to hell. Do I belong in hell? Just on virtue of a coin toss? Yes or no? I want everyone to answer. So this is scenario, perfectly innocent person goes up to the gates of heaven and hell and is told, toss a, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey or something, right? Toss a coin, and then they toss the coin, and it's like, then it falls on the wrong side, they go to hell. Okay, cool. Let me ask you a messed up question. I'm in the business of messing your minds. So what the hell difference does it make if at one point in my brain's neural life, there's a coin toss somewhere with my neurons? If it's inside my skull, what difference does it make? Let's say I murdered someone. So let me give myself a knife, right? This is my knife. Haha. And it's bloodied. Let me give myself lots of blood. I bloodied. It's because why? Because I just came back from murdering like my whole family. Here's the trail of blood, right? And you say, you should go to hell. You're a murderer. Okay. And then we zoom in and we find out more about this murderer. Let's zoom in. Let's learn more about. It's not going to be me. Let's just change the example. It's not. It's no more of a. It's no definitely no more of an equal now. It's definitely a minus, right? This person's a jerk. You're such a murderer. We're going to zoom in. Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in. Here we go. And let's go inside that person's brain. I'm told the brain is gray. I've seen a brain. Let's give ourselves some gray here. I sound like the Bob Ross of like diagrams. We're zooming in on this brain, and somewhere in the brain is a coin toss, a completely random, indeterministic event, which is going to determine whether or not I stab or not stab. If it's indeterministic, how's it any more fair to throw me in hell? The fact that it happened in my brain, there's a coin toss in my brain, how is that any important? Is it important? Should it make a difference? Like it's happened inside my skull. There was a coin toss inside my brain. How does that make me a bad guy? I'd go to jail and be removed from society, agreed, but let's just go for praise and blame, right? Who the hell cares about, let's talk about moral worth here for a second, right? Why would it matter so much if it's outside your body, in your hand, all of a sudden if it's in your brain, that's you, man. That was you. There's a coin toss inside your brain. We'll give them more. The thing is, it seems by parity of reasoning, if you're going to say that it was unfair to put the person in hell as a result of a coin toss with their hand, it would be unfair to put them in hell as a result of a coin toss happening inside their brain. Let me say that again slowly, because that encapsulates what we have in front of us. If it's unfair, it violates fairness and justice to punish someone as a result of a coin toss that occurred inside their hand. How is putting that coin toss in their brain make it any different? Does everyone see that? Type in clear if that's clear. As disturbing as that might be, because it has huge repercussions. Like why? Like you zoom in, you learn more about neurology, and you get, well, there's an, is it me? It's not me. And I'll go back and reread what we just read a moment ago, right? So this is the view that yes, free will is incompatible with determinism, but it's also incompatible with indeterminism, because an indeterministic world, everything that happens is arbitrary or as a matter of chance, and so beyond anyone's control. It's not like you're under control if there's a coin toss, right? So it's like, yes, screw determinism. So it's indeterminism, but indeterminism doesn't let you sort of have your praise and blame. The hard incompatibilist doesn't need to have a view about whether the laws of nature are deterministic or indeterministic. He will just say that either way, free will couldn't exist. It wasn't free will to have the coin toss outside. It's not free will to have the coin toss inside your brain. There's no free will in my coin toss. That's why earlier no one cared about the fact that the outcome of my coin toss wasn't credited to me, right? And Samuel says that's Sam Harris's argument, that isn't you authoring the thoughts that emerge from your subconscious telling you to do X. That's exactly his argument. Right? So Sam Harris is a amateur philosopher who gets a lot of publicity, and he says something like that in a book called Free Will, right? He doesn't believe in free will. And notice here, what do we do about that? Well, we got to keep going on with the fact that it at least appears to us that we have free will. So the chapter, kind of for all intents and purposes, ends on the observation that some who have thought seriously about this issue are not very bothered by this. So, for example, the psychologist Daniel Wegner, in his book The Illusion of Conscious Will, argues that we lack free will, but this is something we can live with, because all that matters to our lives is that we as humans maintain the illusion that we are free agents. So remember teleonomy, right? Apparent goal-directed behavior. Well, we have apparent free will, get out of jail free card. I don't have a high opinion of Daniel Wegner in this book. The illusion is sufficient to keep us engaged and to see our lives as meaningful, because again, we have apparent free will. So just as we had apparent goal-directed behavior, we can have apparent free will. Get out of jail free, have all the benefits, none of the grief. My official story is the world is deterministic. And you say, but what about free will? It's just a trick played on you by nature, which raises a ridiculously interesting question. Why in the world would nature have such an elaborate deception as part of it? What could possibly be gained for evolution having a theater of stupidity inside our skulls that is completely epiphenomenal? It's very interesting. Very interesting. And why would we all have the same delusion? First of all, why would we have such a massive delusion? Why wouldn't we all converge on it? And why is it that delusion and not something else? It could be that every time you act, it smells like roses. But that's not how effort feels. Effort feels different. Like you could keep this pacified with something else, right? I mean, it's very strange. So I don't have a lot of good things to say about that. But hey, we can have the apparent move. Remember that move? That's it. My friends, that's all I want to say about this chapter. There's way more we could be doing. But was that an interesting exploration? Because remember, there's more I want to do because it's our last class. Does that make sense? If everything's clear and fun, let me know. If you had a good, because I'm just always mindful of the time. Because we're not at KPU's farm yet and I'm having a braingasm, says Pearl. Now I see that living and conscious are not equally important in this realm because living things could have a telos and could break the laws, regardless of whether or not conscious. Yes, study plants. And this would allow for free will and pre-consciousness. And if we're monists, we should recognize any free will possessed by our bodies, also possessed by our consciousness. Okay, nice, Pearl. I love your braingasm. And you're able to at least give it a draft, right? Stuff you could keep. You could keep expanding the word count on that draft. See that, Pearl? Nice. Lots to think about as always. Wow, completely. And so today you found out that either God knows everything, in which case it's already determined which of these two places you're going to go to, or you can go on your own accord, in which case God isn't all-knowing. So that either way is bad news. You've also known that if there's some sort of a coin toss that happens in your brain, you're no more responsible for it than a coin toss that happens in your mouth. So that sucks. So sorry for running a bulldozing through that. And you've also learned a bunch of assumptions, so room for further thought, bunch of forks in the road that we kind of never explore, these unexplored avenues, which Papa Bear is going to tell you, that's where all the action is. So remember, we did all this stuff earlier, right? And I think that's where all the action is, not this, but although you should look down at your hand, but all these assumptions, right? And all of this stuff, let me go to that slide, right? Meditate on this, my kids. Got lots and lots to think about if you're that into this stuff. Yeah. Yeah, that's number 4, right? The laws of nature need to be revised. So I mean, look at where you could put. So look at Pearl's stuff about living, consciousness, all that stuff. You could cling to all of these things, right? The laws of nature, that's the number 4 stuff. Living things and composition, all of this stuff, right? What's the role of first-person experience? It's just an appearance. It's like, yeah, okay, that's number 5. So yeah, there's so much there. I obviously could do the whole class on this, like the whole class, just on this one question. Let's review the second half's topics. My friends, are you down for a quick survey of everything? How's your moral brain power? You still have energy for that? Just a quick survey. We're going to fly over everything we've done in the second half. Does that sound fun? Just as a reminder, and then you can watch the recording in slow motion, help you study. Want to get you off the right track for the thing. Brain mush, good brain mush. Doing okay? Good. Is this cool? Philosophy is completely messed up. I just have to pause and I have to say, I catch myself from the outside teaching what we're doing right now. I see myself from the outside a little bit. Holy cow, what we're doing is completely nuts. And nuts in the sense that, isn't it cool and mind-boggling and hard at the same time? Like, what a thing. Yeah, cool. Go, Pearl. And we'll have the recording anyways, Pearl. Pearl, I bump knuckles with you, my friend. So either way, whatever happens, that's a good, solid bumping of the knuckles, right, with my unopened hand. Yeah, thank you, Pearl. Let the world know. Cool. All right. And I want to see you in my classes again, Pearl. You know that, right? I will see your name again, and I'll be like, yay! Cool. That sounds good. All right, so let's review the second half topic. The first thing we did, what this removes it. Holy cow, that's chapter 6. My highlighter literally removes the thing I wanted to say. Wow, this is so stupid. Chapter 6 was persistence. That's the stupidest thing I've ever seen. I don't use highlighter, I use the underliner. Now I remember why. We were doing persistence. We had 3-dimensionalist views, and we also had 4-dimensionalist views. And we had endurantism, and you can break that down into 2 views. Endurantism of matter, that's tracking the stuff that stays common from lump to statue, from original ship to rotten reassembly. Endurantism of form, that's tracking the rearrangement that stays common from original ship to new ship, or from young living body to old living body, right? That's endurantism. Four-dimensionalist views, perdurantism, where the parts of a spatiotemporal worm can have contradictory properties, but where only like my knee is hard and my belly is soft, where only part of the worm is there at any instant. So it's not like there's a problem with Leibniz's law. And exugerantism, where the whole thing is there at an instant, but which seems to give up on persistent with this collection of stages united by similarity and or causality. These were our main views. Does that help as a refresher? Type in if that was helpful or if you have questions. This is all I wanted to do for that. It's my flyover run in my own words, right? So I'm glad that was helpful, Amber. These are my words, right? So, and it's just a one, and I've made it a point of having everything fit on one page. So you can put the video on pause and you can stare at it, right? And you can say, oh yeah, because I feel like there's a point at which you have to have synthesis, right? And you need to be able to see, because the chapters are big. They've got lots of pages, on average about like 20, 25 pages. And so these are my isms. So if you want to study for the exam, you should be able to say intelligent things about all of these. And by intelligent things, I mean the pros and cons and the arguments for and against them, right? What are the shortcomings of each that the other fixes and vice versa. That's what I've done for that. Let's do the other chapter. The other chapter after that was modality. Again, I've highlighted the very part that hides it now when I PDF this thing. Here are the views, right? We had ontologically committed view and an ersatz versions of modal realism to try to avoid the ontological commitments. Modal realism, that was the full-on, unadulterated David Lewis possible world stuff. What can happen does happen only elsewhere in a concrete world with which we can have no causal/informational contact. Actual is thus an indexical term, no more different or mysterious than here. And then you have other views, which are versions of modal realism that attempt to get all of the benefits of Lewis's modal realism using only actual ingredients and or glossing possible worlds as abstract, not concrete. Big players here were fictionalism. The possible and the necessary are best understood in the same way that we understand works of fiction, like novels, or conventionalism, which is closely allied. The possible and the necessary are just ways that we collectively agree to use words. And of course, these kind of fall short of actually doing real metaphysics in some sense, but whether or not someone's satisfied with that, that's the question. So pros and cons of all of those. My friends, is that clear and helpful? If you've got everything is good, type in clear. If you've got a question, ask your question. Again, just a flyby, everything on one page, trying to classify the views as well, following the classifications offered in the book, right? And again, the job would be to be able to know what those isms mean, not just regurgitate them, but say in your own words and argue for and against. What are the drawbacks of each? What can one fix that the other can't? Then we looked at causation, right? That was chapter 8. We can say reductive theories. These are the theories that try to explain causation by explaining them in terms of other things. And then we have process theories. It's not clear. I would put the process theories inside the red deductive ones, but who the hell cares? Simple regularity theory. It considers causation to be a generalization from past observations, but it leads to silliness. It's like, well, it's the sound of the gun that killed the person. You have no grounds to say that it wasn't, because that's a generalization from past observations. Every time a gun fired, it went pow, and it's the pow that killed you. Of course, that's silly. So we beef that up with nomic regularity theory. Causation is a generalization from past observations. That must fit with laws of nature. Given what we know about laws of nature, the sound pow doesn't kill anyone. Bullets do. Counterfactual theory. C causes E, cause causes effect, make a pair of modal claims, namely that C and E both actually occur, and in any possible world where C doesn't occur, E doesn't occur. That's the Lewis's account. Probability theory, C causes E, can be translated as the statistical claim that C makes E more probable. We didn't look at that in class, but that's in the chapter. So think what you will about that. That's a player. And then process theories, well, physical theory uses notions from physics, the intersecting word lines and all that stuff. It's unclear to my mind that it just seems to restate a lot of simple things in a more fancy way. It doesn't seem to actually explain anything. But in any event, it's unable to account for absences as both causes and effects. So it's by not watering the plant that you killed it. It's the absence of water that kills it, things like that, right? My friends, is that clear? If that's clear, type in clear. If you've got a question, type your question. Again, we can't obviously unpack all of these because you know that if you pressed on all of these, there'd be a billion bullets underneath, right? They'd unpack as something. And then today what we had was the free will. That was our last chapter. And that was it, right? Is free will compatible with determinism? Yeah, then it's compatibilism. Is determinism true? Yeah, but it's compatible, so it's okay. It's soft determinism. You can have both. No, it's not compatible. Oh, really? Is determinism true? Yeah, so you can't have both. I'm going to go with it's all dominoes. And so, yeah, you can't have both, but you know what? We have free will. It's not dominoes. And why? Well, all sorts of reasons, right? And all of the nuts that all of the beautiful things we looked at. Is that clear, everyone? Clear as it can be, because you have to study on this stuff. That's the chapter. If that's clear, type in clear. If you got a question, ask your question. I'm actually looking at the clock, and it's like literally going to be 12:15, which is my goal. We're doing beautiful, and at the price of skipping over some stuff. And again, it's just a question of if we had an eternity of time, we could do. Man, could you do a lot of good philosophy in what's that movie, Groundhog Day? Meet again tomorrow.